Hi, welcome to another endorsement interview with the Times Editorial Board. Today we have two candidates for Lake County Assessor. We have the Republican incumbent, Jolie Covaciu, and the Democratic challenger, Jerome Prince. Welcome to both of you. I'm Doug Ross, editorial page editor at the Times. Here with us also are Bob Heiss, editor, and Brian Vernellis, videographer. Welcome and thank you for coming. Let's start with your qualifications and a little bit about your background so that we can get that out of the way. Jolie?
I have been in the assessing field since 1989. I am going on my 17th year in the assessing profession, and I, of course, have the level 3 certification. I'm a certified tax rep with the state of Indiana and also a member of the International Assessing Officials IAAO.
Okay. Jerome?
I am Jerome Prince, a Lake County council person, currently a former Gary City council person for 2 terms. Also have been in the assessing industry for a period of time. I actually started in 1994, working for one of the local township assessors for 11 years. After that, went on to become a certified tax rep as well. Also level 3 certified and a member of IAAO as well.
Okay. So here's the issue facing the voters. What's the difference between the two of you? Go ahead.
Well, obviously I have the experience of tens of thousands of properties and personally inspecting them. I have been gleaned from numerous years of experience of relating to taxpayers and talking to them and understanding what their concerns and things of that nature are. And I also have handled appeals up to, at the PETA and things like that. So naturally, being in the office for the last 11 months, I've had the experience to look inside the office and do things of that. Of course, going back to 1989, the whole going from cost approach to the market approach, I've been through all those changes, and I've been able to observe every facet of the changes in Lake County and in the state that have transpired over the years. And I think that that experience has really been advantageous to my work.
Okay.
Well, like the assessor or my opponent, I too have a vast amount of experience in assessments. As it appears, about 5 years less than Jolie. But in any event, I think more relevant, one of the salient points that sticks out to me in terms of the difference between her and I is the experience that I have working on the other side as a Gary City Council person responsible for establishing and passing a budget, and more recently as a county council person. I think that I have a certain perspectival advantage which enables me to understand all the components that go into not only achieving the value, but how it relates into each individual budget. As it relates to the assessor's office, I think that that's important because that'll give me the ability to effectuate what I consider to be better management of the resources that are available in order to do the job.
Well, one of the things people are going to care about is how do you handle the appeals, and particularly how do you address a backlog. Go ahead.
Well, one thing that I don't think people are aware of is the fact that because we have 5 townships, including the jurisdiction under the county, when the backlog began, although in 2002, when the reassessment occurred, and that company came in and they did put multipliers on, there wasn't the sales data. So the sales data was accumulated and actually began in 2006, the real trending that would put those market factors on. So as we moved forward in that's when the bulk of the appeals began coming in, were when people's assessments changed based on market value. So when the appeals came in and they go you have your preliminary conference, and the township assessor, in conjunction with the county assessor, their jurisdiction, we are called to defend our assessment and have that preliminary hearing. Well, how the backlog actually occurred was at the time, and I truly do not know in the past, in 2007, how the decision was made to have, when there was not an agreement at the township level, it would come to the county, and it should go to the PTBOA, the Property Tax Board of Appeals. Well, they would have a middle preliminary hearing, and then sometimes the hearing officers at the county and the hearing officers at the township would not necessarily have an agreement, and then it would go to the PTBOA. So what I did at the beginning of the year is I said, let's have the township go back to defending their assessment. The state requires them to defend their assessment because they're the ones that set the values in the equation of the trending. So when we disperse them back, so in actuality, could I really give you a full number on what the county jurisdiction, what each township jurisdiction, how many there really were over the years? All these numbers have been going out there. At one time I read in the paper was 13,000 down to 9. Then, so what I did was everything, I put it into an Excel spreadsheet because it hadn't actually had a log. So we pulled everything out of the drawers, dispersed it back to the townships and said, you need to work on your appeals and defend them at the PTBOA. And that's how the backlog has been taken care of, is we're taking out a middleman. Now, of course, we're going to have a dialogue if they need our help with pulling information out of, if they're saying, do you have anything under your jurisdiction that would be a comparable sale to that? Of course, we're going to work with them, and they work with us, and they help us. We'll call Angie Guernsey and say, do you have a sale on such and such that you possibly could help us with? So that's how the whole history that I see it went.
Okay.
Well, I see the backlog of appeals as being one of several priorities of the office. And first, I want to commend the assessor on the work that she's done with the backlog of appeals. However, I think that in terms of priority, I think that we need to continue our history of on-time billing, first and foremost, particularly for residential property owners more so than the commercial homeowners. Secondly, I think that we definitely need to continue to reduce the backlog of appeals. A third priority for me as assessor would be to try to reduce erroneous errors by working cohesively with all township assessors. And I know that sounds sort of cliche-ish, but I guess if I could be a little bit more specific, by working with the township assessors, establishing common practices of assessments across the county. Lastly, I think that we just need to ensure that this current reassessment that we're working with, the 4-year cyclical reassessment, is managed effectively. Past poor oversight has led to millions of dollars in appeals and false assessments and unnecessary state scrutiny. Neither of those things would be allowed or tolerated under my administration, and it's something that I intend to address in that perspective order.
And in terms of past, how far back are you looking?
I'm sorry?
When you say past poor oversight, how far back are you looking?
Well, I would say probably from the history of reassessments. I certainly can't speak to the current assessor as she hasn't participated in a reassessment, but certainly the administration before that and before that were plagued with erroneous errors and resulting in a number of unnecessary, in my opinion, appeals.
One of the things people are going to be looking at is Porter County, for example, is going through and looking at, does this tax exemption really apply in this particular instance? How aggressive should Lake County be in that regard?
I'll answer. I think Lake County should continue its current efforts in attempting to identify persons who are not being responsible and fulfilling their tax obligation. In addition to that, I just think that there's other areas that the assessor, although he doesn't have any control or direct authority, I think that the assessor is certainly in a position, or should be in a position, to have a voice on it. Issues such as the elimination of personal property tax. That's something that I've campaigned on in the primary as being an opponent of, particularly when there's no set plan to replace the revenue that'll be reduced. I didn't come prepared with any specific numbers, but I will tell you to point out the significance that 15%, a little bit more than 15% of all taxable property for value in the state of Indiana comes from personal property, and with just those numbers there, that should give you an idea of the impact that the further removal of personal property could have. Even more relevant or more closer to home would be the impact that the tax caps and things of that nature have already had on our school systems. Munster, as I understand right now, is struggling in terms of being able to finance the school operations. City of Gary certainly has had its issues in the past and continue to. So I just think that whereas exemptions are an important area, there's other loftier areas that the assessor, although they don't have any direct authority, should have a voice and attempt to preserve the value through some of those means.
Okay, Jolie?
Okay, we talked about two topics. You're talking about tax exempt, which is non-for-profit. Tax exempt non-for-profit, the application process is, we do have a department that handles that. And we also have the applications have to meet the specific requirement under the IC code. Once that information is gathered for the tax exempt status, then we recommend to the PTBOA. The process is the PTBOA has to approve or deny. So we take that tax exempt application with all the documentations that they is required also with the tax exempt status by the state. So churches and educational purposes and things of that nature, and whatever documentation that they need. If it is a new application, we send a person out for a site inspection and ensure that it is indeed a church or what they are saying that they're doing, and they provide the documentation. Then that goes on before the Property Tax Board of Appeals, and they approve our recommendation of denial. So you can see we have a list even just this year of numerous applicants. Now, in exemptions, just like over in the auditor's office, I'm sure that there are people that try to falsify and forge documents. So there does need to be a continual, thorough investigation done, whether or not what that looks like. I continually would network with other counties and see if they have any procedures in place. Of course, we know that, I'm not sure if it was the auditor or John Schneider found that ginormous house out there that was $1 million home that was being exempt as a church. So I certainly know that when we pull up and it's a residential home, and people will always try to push something through, but we do have a thorough inspection of those things. The personal property that Mr. Prince explained also has been a topic since the beginning of the year, when the governor had spoke of abolishing it or kind of having it phased out. And it is indeed the 15%. And yesterday we submitted our Form 15, which actually it's $4.9 billion in AV in Lake County. And as the assessor, I have to follow the statutes that say you should assess this. Now, it is a self-reporting document. So there are, I think that for small businesses, it is a burden on them. But and the fact that it's self-assessed and we have to investigate them and keep all the paperwork in order. But what that would look like in Lake County would be an additional tax. We would have the money would have to be found somewhere. So it might be in a smaller county to with the actual self-reporting and what they gain from it is completely a different ball game than what Lake County is, and it would not be advantageous at this point to just cut it off, because it would probably fall back on increase in our local income tax or something of that nature. So, but as far as assessing it, we will continue to do so long as the state legislators continue to have us do that.
Okay. Are there any changes you would make in the way you interact with the taxpayers and in the way records are kept or created?
Well, I'm not sure about the interaction with the taxpayers. I would imagine that the office functions in a professional manner. You know, I will say that's part of my strategic plan, though, is to enhance areas where we can. I think first, what's necessary is to put the right people in the right places and equip them with the right resources in order to do the job. And then, and only then, can you measure successes with various statistical measurements, such as did the assessments get better, did the number of appeals decline, did the professionalism in the office increase. You know, to ensure that the taxpayers are welcomed and feel that there's a open and transparent process would always be a priority. It's been a priority as an elected official since I've been one, and I don't anticipate anything would change if I obtain the assessor's office. I'm sorry, but I missed the second part of your question.
Is there any way, with all the new technology that we have, is there any way that you would use that to change the way records are created or maintained?
Yes, in fact, there is newer technology that's available and that I would certainly seek to introduce into the assessor's office, not only to benefit the taxpayer with the overall or the achieved value, but to better or more efficiently discharge the duties of the office. I think in order to do that, however, it's going to be necessary to hire the most professional, knowledgeable people that I can. And I mean, let's just face it, in a technology-driven office, there's not very much room for low-level skills. I'm not saying that everyone should have the level 3, for instance, or be required to, but at the very minimum, I think it's important that everyone in the office at least have some valuation background and be prepared to embrace whatever newer technologies that were out there in order for us to achieve our job more efficiently.
Okay.
Well, one important thing to me was that if you've ever been inside the assessor's office, when you walk in the office, the assessor's actual office was in the far southwest corner of the building, and it was a rather grand room. And I immediately moved my office to the front and did a reorganization and made 4 departments: personal property and non-for-profit. We have our real estate department. We have our hearings and appeals department, and then an administrative, which is an HR, and making sure and that the director of that is also in the front office. So my office is right outside of the counter, and then her office is outside to kind of oversee and hear what's going on. As far as there has been, we've looked into, and of course, Mr. Prince is very knowledgeable about what the vast differences of options for the new software would be, based on the fact that he is the councilman that oversees. So in the beginning of the year, we've had conversations, and he's looked into it because, I believe in bringing everyone into making decisions. It's not just my decision. Township assessors have to agree with it. The oversight of who handles the budget would have to look into that. So that is always, the future is always bright in those regards. I also implemented that all sales disclosures, appeals, everything has a new tracking system. New construction that we go out on, each department has to be held accountable for saying what the work productivity of the office is. So everything's been put into that sort of a monitoring system. And for public inquiries, there's a Form 11 and a tax bill that serves as notice of assessment. And this year, it would cost $250,000 to mail out Form 11s to all the taxpayers. So obviously, it's not required of law to mail out the Form 11s, that is. So the tax bill serves as notice. So after you receive your tax bill, you have 45 days to appeal. This kind of goes back to always the way that it was even at cost approach. I think a person should be able to come in and inquire about their assessment and speak to someone. There just shouldn't be this 45 days and that's where you're at and that's entirely sorry, you have to wait until next year. Because like Mr. Prince said earlier, there could be an inaccuracy on an assessment, and wouldn't it be a shame if a person who knows their house, especially homes that when you look out on the outside, you might think that it's a full 2-story and then they've got cathedral ceilings. They can tell us that, and maybe we can look into some changes of that nature. So I have a form that is the front counter has the taxpayer fill out, and it is a request to review my assessment and sit down and talk with someone about it. It's not a formal appeal, but it certainly gets a dialogue going and makes sure that we are looking into it and finding anything that could be. And at the end of the day, a lot of times people just, you educate them and they walk away and they're not really, they realize, oh, my assessment is within range of market value. So.
Okay. Bob, did you have any questions? Okay. So I guess we've covered a lot of territory. Is there anything we didn't ask that we should have?
There's always just so much about the work that, you know, goes through my mind. I do want to say that I love assessing. There is a component of expertise that is a real estate professional. We are now assessing professionals. It's no longer just a, you know, press of a button and print out paperwork. And I agree that the level of expertise does need to improve within the office, and you know it takes time to educate people and resources and networking with other county assessors, township assessors, things like that. And basically that's where I'm at with how the assessments are going currently.
Okay, Jerome?
I don't know that there's any questions that you could ask or additional questions, but I would want to point out that I think going forward that the largest challenge in the assessor's office is going to be the ability to do more with less. With the full-blown effects of the tax caps, all counties in Indiana are faced with the same dilemma. The responsibilities of the assessor's office have doubled while the budgets in terms of dollars have shrank. So in order to continue to make that equation work for our taxpayers, I believe it's important that we make sure we have the most knowledgeable professional staff available and that we equip them with the most modern technological advances in order to achieve efficient appeals, or assessments rather, and when there is an appeal generated, that we do so in a timely fashion. So I just want to thank you gentlemen for the opportunity to speak with you again today.
Okay, well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. This has been another endorsement interview with the Times Editorial Board with the incumbent Jolie Covaciu and her challenger Jerome Prince. Thank you for viewing.